Welcome into the Pride of Detroit POD cast, your home for all of your Lions news, updates, analysis, and so much more. We are coming at you pre-recorded on maybe Monday, maybe Tuesday. I don't know when you're seeing this. I don't know when you're hearing this, but I'm sure it's coming at a time when you probably need a bit of a pick-me-up. Uh, Guys, I'm not sure how much of a pick-me-up we're going to be able to do, but we're going to try and do our very best. With the Lions coming off of their first back-to-back loss in quite some time. I'm your host, Miko. You can find me over at Twitter at the Miko Scott, joined once again by my amazing co-host. First and foremost, we have your senior editor over at prideofdetroit.com, Ryan Matthews at Ryan_POD. Ryan, how are you feeling today? I know I'm feeling lethargic, so I don't know. How are you?
Merry Christmas, Miko.
I think that's probably the best way of starting this. I had like an entire like Christmas limerick kind of like in my head based off of like how I was feeling, and I was just like, you know what? I don't have the energy to even try and put like any oomph into that. So we're just gonna chug along. Joined also by our editor in chief over at pridedetroit.com as well. You know him at Detroit Online over on Twitter, Jeremy Reisman. Jeremy, I know you were pretty hot and frustrated yesterday.
Yeah.
How have things calmed down now that you're, with family, taking a nice little trip? How has everything kind of settled for you?
Well, I like about 15 minutes before we sat down to record here, I was in a hot tub, so I'm feeling a little bit more relaxed and chill. And Florida will do that to you a little bit. I'm not advocating everything about Florida, to be clear, but for a 24-hour detox of bad juju, not bad, not bad.
I was gonna say that I can probably think of worse ways of like trying to get over a really frustrating loss. And I that would probably be near the top for me. So let's get into the conversation. So the Lions did in fact lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers yesterday. Score of that game, I believe, was 29-24. A lot of things near the end of that game really could have swung, I think, things in a different direction on how this conversation would have went. But Jeremy, I'm going to throw it to you first. Where do you want to start? Because I feel like there's a lot of things to unpack. We can start at the end of the game. We can start in the middle, wherever you want, because I feel like there's a talking point literally in every inch of this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think I want you guys to more talk about the officiating stuff. I kind of got out everything I wanted to during our PODD post game video. So, I mean, I'll just start with, this is a collapse of a team that we haven't seen collapse like this at the end of a season like this. Like, obviously, last year with the injuries and all that, but like even last year, you had that week 18 game where it was just like, oh no, this team is still fighting like hell. This team is still somewhere deep down inside of all these injuries. There's still this team that can win a Super Bowl. And then obviously it didn't carry over the playoffs, but this is the first time I have seen a team, a Dan Campbell team play worse, like decidedly worse in December than they did the rest of the season. And we were all hoping, expecting, praying for the opposite, right? We were all saying, they're not, they're playing like you know, a wild card team right now. Hopefully, by the time we get to December, they'll figure everything out. The offensive line will settle in. Kelvin Shepard will figure things out with the defense, and it is going in the opposite direction, and that is scary. It's scary. Like that is not what we've come to understand about this coaching staff. That's not what we've come to understand about the people in this building. The fact that this team has gotten terrible in stopping the run and terrible at running the football. They're two stalemates. They're two tent poles of who they are is frustrating as hell because listen, you knew there were going to be bumps in the road this year in terms of running the football, right? You were hoping by now they would have been settled in. You can use the injury excuse if you want to a little bit. I think it's at least a little bit warranted in this particular game where you have a guy making his first career start at center. You have Christian Mahogany clearly not even close to 100% playing mostly in this game, and you have another rookie on the other side of him. So you can use that excuse, I suppose. But I cannot explain what's happening on defense. It does not make any sense. The injury excuse is a little bit valid at safety because I think safety play had a big reason why they were able to rip off a couple of those big plays, but everything else is inexcusable because that front seven is about as healthy as it's ever been and about as talented as it's ever been under the Dan Campbell era. And so for the defense to be failing as much as it is against, I mean, that is a pitiful Pittsburgh Steelers offense. I'm sorry. Like Aaron Rodgers isn't even doing anything back there. He's throwing screen passes, he's throwing swing passes, he's handing the ball off 30 times. He's a shell of himself, and you let that team score what? Almost 30 on you, and it probably could have been more if I don't know, someone doesn't miss a chip shot field goal. Like that was a pathetic effort on defense, and that to me is frustrating. There needs to be some sort of accountability. You better not go in front of a microphone and tell me that, well, if we take away these 18 plays, we did great. That's some BS. That was a BS effort. That was a BS game plan. I need to see immediate, like, if I know we're going to get to it later in the podcast, but like I better see some improvement in the final two games on defense because that was disgusting.
Yeah, the big takeaway for me, and I don't want to jump too far ahead because I know that we want to take at least a little bit of a peek ahead into what's going to come for the Detroit Lions over these next 2 weeks, and then kind of like a macro view of the offseason in terms of like our biggest questions we feel like need to be answered. But to your point, Jeremy, I think the thing that's most unsettling about this loss, you point out the two important hallmarks of this team were stopping the run, running the football. And I think about what it took to get to this point. And I think all of us were 100% behind Dan Campbell in establishing a culture and establishing a team with an identity. This is uncharted territory for the Detroit Lions as they head into the offseason. It's not about establishing a culture and establishing an identity, it's about recapturing it because it's gone. That game last night, that ship has sailed. How do you get it back? And I know Jennifer Hammond, I think, was the one who asked Dan that question about like, you had this mentality like, is that you guys? Is it the coaching staff? Is it the players? Is it like what is it? Is it the injuries? What's going on? And of course, Dan Campbell says it's on me.
Yeah.
Kept it real short, real sweet and simple. To me, Miko, the big takeaway from this game is how do the Lions recapture what it is that made them for the past, essentially like 3 seasons? Like, how do they get back to being that football team? Because that football team last night that ran for, what was it, 15 yards
Yep.
Yeah.
and gave up 230 yards on the ground to the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's not a Dan Campbell led Lions football team.
I want to say like I think even before you get to answering that question, for me, which was one of my biggest takeaways, which is how did we get here in the first place? Because Jeremy, to your point, you look at the offensive line, and yes, there's some pieces that have been moved around. And yes, you had Kingsley Iguakin in there at center for a time, and you were kind of just moving a couple people's pieces over. But even while they were struggling to run the ball, I'm like, it shouldn't be this bad. Like this looks,
Yeah.
to your point earlier, this looks worse than it did in week one. And this isn't even necessarily like, hey, communication isn't on point or things of that nature. This goes to, once again, I want to really push, PODD. If you guys haven't had a chance to subscribe and take a listen to what Eric and Jeremy broke down post game, it was really like a schematic, just like play calling issue where it's like, why are we pulling Tate Ratledge and why are we asking Christian Mahogany to pull and all of these different things? Why aren't we being more aggressive in running downhill and trying different types of run concepts? And so for me, it was very much like a wait. This isn't even necessarily recapturing an identity. It's like, when did we decide that we were just going to go away from it entirely? And the same thing with the defensive side, where it's like, I feel like this defense used to be at a point in time way more aggressive, way more like get after you and force you into situations that you were not going to be comfortable with, whether they had an Aiden Hutchinson back there or not. They were still trying to dictate how the game was going to be played defensively. And it feels like somewhere along the line, these last few weeks, they've become extremely passive. So Ryan, I agree. There are a lot of questions about how do you recapture an identity and a play style that Dan Campbell and this coaching staff and this regime has put in place. But Jeremy, I'm also looking at this team like, what is it that actually caused you to lose it? Because I don't think you can fix something if you don't know how it just kind of slipped through your fingers so easily.
Right. Which is why, like, I kind of raised the hubbub I did after Kelvin Shepard pulled that BS excuse last week, where he's just like, no team has ever lined up and beaten us and run the ball down our throat. Like, no, that's exactly what happened last week. And it's exactly what happened again this week. And when you don't take accountability the first time it happens, and then it happens again, that's a really, really bad look, right? And it's the same kind of team too, right? I was a little bit less scared of the Steelers running attack than I was the Rams because while they both play a bunch of 13 personnel and throw jumbo sets at them, the Rams are like the most efficient running team in football. The Steelers are like 13th. And you let the Steelers basically do the exact same thing to you, and you didn't have an answer for it, and you didn't have good schemes. You were getting outnumbered on the line and the gaps, and yes, again, like I do think there was some bad gap integrity on the back end, but guess what? That's on coaching too, because you just had I don't know what, like 60 snaps worth of 13 personnel where you could self scout and say, hey, when this guy motions over here, the gap suddenly changes for this for you. And you had a full week to get ready for that, and you didn't. And so that's my big issue on the defensive side of the ball. Offensive side of the ball, you said it too, Miko. Like sometimes there was like Jameer did not even have a single chance. The way they were not blocking the backside defender, and that guy was immediately crashing down and making a play because Jameer just got the football. Like Dan Campbell even admit, like, yeah, there were some schematic issues early in that game. And why didn't they fix them? Because they abandoned the run. They didn't have an opportunity to do anything else. I shouldn't say that. They did have an opportunity. They could have run the ball a little bit more in the second half. I understand they only ran 3 plays in the third quarter, and for the second freaking time, they just let you go 3 and out, and your defense can't get off the field on any third down, whether it's 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 15. Like these third quarters, like I thought I knew what the third quarter was under Ben Johnson. This is even worse. This is like your defense can't get off the ball, off the field. Your offense is running 3 plays, can't establish any sort of rhythm, and then you have to go panic mode at the end. And somehow the Lions actually managed to pull off panic mode and almost win this football game, but it never would have felt earned. This team just got absolutely worked out of halftime, and man, I don't know. It was just it's very disappointing to me right now to see this team play the way it does because it's hard for me to point to anything other than coaching. If the fundamentals are still bad, if I mean I always point to 2 things that I think 2 points of the game where I think coaching takes all. It's third down and it's red zone because you have to make the right play calls in those moments. You're dealing in short areas, and the Lions went over in the red zone on offense and some really pathetic offensive possessions in the red zone. And then, obviously on third down was a huge issue defensively. And so, I don't know what to say about the coaching. Like I wanted to be patient with these guys. I still understand it's weird to be picky about the second high scoring offense in football, but they're not putting up points against teams that they should. They're not scoring on enough red zone opportunities. And then, I mean, defensively, it's just an unbelievable regression that I didn't see coming.
I think the other thing too is you look at third down efficiency from the Steelers, right? Like I know a lot of people wanted to give Dan Campbell a lot of grief for his his decision to call that timeout on the Steelers' final drive of the first half, right?
Yeah.
Before we get the ridiculous 45-yard touchdown pass to Kenneth Gainwell. But when Dan Campbell calls that timeout, it's 3rd and 11.
Right.
Like, here's the thing. The expectation is that you should think your defense is going to get off the field. So calling that timeout is not a problem. Calling a timeout is not a problem in my mind because you have to operate under the assumption that on 3rd and 11, your team can get off the field. They could not get off the field. You know why they couldn't get off the field? Because the Lions, the run defense was so bad. Jonnu Smith outrushed the entire team. Jonnu Smith had more rushing yards than the Detroit Lions last night. If you took away, let's play Kelvin Shepard's game. Let's take away the 2 45-yard touchdown runs by Jaylen Warren, and let's take away the 18-yard rushing play by Kenneth Gainwell. The Steelers ran for 122 yards on 24 carries. They still averaged 5 yards a carry.
Pathetic.
I guess the point I want to come back to, and then the last thing I want to say about the individual play, Jared Goff threw the ball 54 times. You know how many times the Lions have won with Jared Goff throws the ball 50 times in a game? 0.
Almost won. We almost got our first one.
He's 0 for 5 when he throws the ball for 50 times or more. And again, that is a reflection of David Montgomery's usage, Jameer Gibbs' ineffectiveness up front. Like, I think early on this season, we talked about what was so uncharacteristic about the Lions, right? The uncharacteristic things that they were doing, where it was like, no, no way. Like, I'm on Ross St. Brown. He doesn't drop passes. Well, he dropped his ninth one
Yeah.
on Sunday, his most that he's ever dropped in a season. The rushing game was bad. Jared Goff doesn't usually throw the ball 50 times. The defense hasn't been that bad. Miko, like another thing that stands out to me in you talking about how aggressive the defense was, right? You know how many times they blitzed Aaron Rodgers last night, according to Pro Football Focus? They blitzed him on 7 of his dropbacks. 7 of his 45 dropbacks, the Lions blitzed Aaron Rodgers. Now, is that a personnel thing? It may be. You know, without Kirby Joseph, without Brian Branch, without, another one of your starting corners in Terry and Arnold, like, to me that it makes more sense like under the Aaron Glenn, school of thought where it's like, well, I'm missing some of my horses. We got to find a way to artificially create pressure. Aaron Rodgers is a guy who wants to get the ball out quick. Let's force him to get it out even quicker. It's the thing that I think is most uncharacteristic of this football team is again the way they were deployed. Like Aleem McNeil was dropping back in coverage. Aiden Hutchinson dropped back in coverage. Like there was more things where it was just like, this is the team I saw in week 1.
Yeah.
But I also feel like those are things that we've seen. We saw AG do those things as well, and we would complain about them then. So it's crazy
No, the royal we. I don't know about that. I think the job that Aaron Glenn did last year with a defensive group that was taped together with
sure,
toothpaste and whatever. Like I'm just saying, like it doesn't seem like Kelvin Shepherd is as prepared.
Well, and I will agree with you with it because I think that's the thing that you talk about being prepared, and I immediately go to like know your opponent, knowing that the Steelers aren't a team that typically like complete a lot of deep passes. I think when we talked about it on Before the Roar, Aaron Rodgers is near the bottom of the league when it comes down to like passes that have been completed or even attempted that have 10 plus air yards.
Yep.
So this wasn't a team that was necessarily going to threaten you deep. And you would think that with that type of thing in mind, like this is an opportunity for you to maybe do more of that single high stuff, maybe for you to create more pressure. And this felt like an overcorrection, Jeremy, in a lot of ways, where it's like, well, hey, we've been getting torched a lot, and a lot of our corners, like, again, even to our detriment, like we have been saying, like, hey, these corners need help. You need to be able to, provide a little bit of safety help here and there. This felt like a massive overcorrection to a team that doesn't play that style of football.
The wrong team to overcorrect it. And this is not the team where you have to be like, oh my God, they're going to throw 40 yards. Like you just got through that gauntlet of the Cowboys, the Packers, and the Rams. You don't have to worry about that with Aaron Rodgers. Bring everybody up, play a little bit more press, play as much man as you want. That's fine. They don't have great receivers. And they like the cushions they were giving some of the receivers sometimes. It's just like, what they're doing. And I do understand that Aaron Rodgers he took some shots that game, right? Like, and generally speaking, the Lions did pretty good on him outside of the miraculous, whatever Kenneth Gainwell BS thing that happened. But like, you made sure that they didn't connect on those 4 shots to the detriment of the other 60 plays that they ran, right? You protected yourself against the explosive plays in the passing game and got torched on the ground. Congratulations, great game plan. And to bring it back to the fundamental stuff too, like this team is still committing the stupidest penalties, still not able to get 11 guys on the field. I feel like no one noticed except for me, but the Steelers are on a 4th and 2, a very critical down in a very critical moment. And the Lions had to call a timeout because they had 10 guys on the field. Again, it's week 16, false starts, illegal shifts. I know there's some new pieces on the offensive line. I know there are some new tight ends, but get it together. Like you were on a playoff run. You were on a can't miss situation. Get everyone on the same page. It is week freaking 16. And I mean, now it's over. Like you lost it. You had your opportunities. You can blame the officiating all you want, but that team played some horrible, horrible football. Really, I would argue pretty much the whole game, but certainly coming out of halftime all the way until like 6 minutes left in the game.
Yeah, I would say I would definitely highlight the second half more so than I would the first half, Ryan. Like the first half wasn't by any means great, but it was like, okay, like maybe you're just still in the feeling out phase. Maybe things will get going. Like I felt like the Lions were moving the ball well. They were definitely challenging in situations where they were running like a little bit more man coverage. I thought Rocketson was playing really well in the first half. And then yeah, like you have the big play to Kenneth Gainwell that sets up the or that gets the Steelers that touchdown, and you go into halftime with a tie game, and it just felt like they just came out flat after that. Like it just felt like there wasn't any type of correction on the offensive or defensive side up until the fourth quarter when the offense finally got an opportunity to get back on the field.
The third player is or excuse me, the third quarter looks like an absolute nightmare in the play-by-play recap of this game. Like a fumble prevents, the Steelers from knocking it in the end zone there when they're on the Detroit 9-yard line. And then it's a Lions safety. And then the Lions don't touch the ball again until the fourth quarter because of that 17 play, almost 10-minute drive by the Steelers where I don't know, what did the Steelers do? They like they Lions the Lions. Like that's what
Yeah.
happened. Like I mean, it's like 4-yard run, 2-yard run, 9-yard pass, 3-yard pass, 5-yard run. You know what I mean? Like 9-yard run, 3-yard run. It was the death by a thousand paper cuts that everybody talks about, but it was just one where the Lions just kept bleeding, man. They kept bleeding in that second half. And I mean, they made it close in the end, but the first half, to your point, Miko, it it didn't feel as I mean, the opening drive was a stinker, whatever. And then they had another three and out, but like, I mean, they turned it over on downs on Pittsburgh's doorstep. They kicked the field goal and they scored that touchdown. So the first half felt like a football team that had some confidence, and then after that Steelers drive, like it was curtains, man. It truly felt like this season was over.
It goes back to what you were saying earlier, or what we were talking about earlier, in terms of like feeling prepared, because it doesn't feel like there was a counterpunch. It doesn't feel like there was a countermeasure to like, hey, okay, we've only ran the ball this many times in the first half. We're not finding a lot of success in what we initially thought we would. Like this is a run game that for years has been praised for like how many different ways they can hurt you in the run game. That they can run duo, they can run gap concept, they can run zone, they can do all of these different things mostly because they have two dynamic backs that can operate in both systems, but also because you have an offensive line in the past that was able to like function in that way. So, Jeremy, is it as simple as just saying like, well, hey, because the offensive line is in shambles, that's why we're not seeing the run game excel? Or is there something like deeper under the skin there that's like, no, there's like something actually wrong here?
Say it, Jeremy.
I mean,
Watch a Bears game.
right. I mean, here, the Lions' running game was way more dynamic last year. Why it's less dynamic this year could be because of coaching, but it also could be like they've decided that offensive line isn't capable of being that dynamic. That offensive line isn't capable of running duo and gap and zone and all that stuff. Um, I don't know what the answer is. It's probably a little bit of both. It certainly doesn't seem like that offensive line in the past few weeks have been capable of much in terms of the run game, which is a huge, massive disappointment. But I think we already poked holes in some of the scheming in this one too. It didn't make sense. It wasn't working, and then by the time they went away from it, they kind of went away from everything in the run game, and it was too late to make any sort of adjustments. So I don't know. It's something that has kind of defined. I mean, as much as we want to pretend like the running game has been great all year, I've been pointing it out every single on paper article I write. It was being carried by explosive plays early in the season. The down to down efficiency was never good. They were, in terms of success rate, middle of the pack or slightly lower than average pretty much all season long. And so something's rotten to the core there. It might be the coaching. I think we can't rule out even looking at someone like Hank Fraley, the run game coordinator of this team, the guy who hasn't maybe developed a guy like Christian Mahogany or Giovanni Manu or Tate Ratledge, I think, is playing fine. Not great, but fine for a rookie season. There needs to be more there. And it's hard for me to sit from the stands and tell you who exactly is to blame, but it's clear all the parts aren't working right now. And, you know, the Lions are just no longer getting those 40, 50-yard runs from Jahmyr Gibbs that makes everyone feel good.
But you compound those things, right? And I think that's another point to consider, right? Where it's not just personnel, it's coaching, it's
Yep.
and all those pieces moving adds up to what you get, Miko. Where Kingsley Aguakin, take the PFF grade for what it's worth, was the best run blocker on the night.
Sure, I guess.
I, not great, Bob. Not great.
No, not when you have a Penei Sewell out there, not when you have a Taylor Decker out there. Like you expect. I mean, again, that was one of the things that I feel like we all felt really confident about for like the offensive line. It's like, well, at least you have those two guys, and those two guys should at least be able to make things a lot easier on the rest of the offense. At the same time, I think before we get into a break here, I do want to talk about the officiating stuff that we kind of alluded to this morning. Jeremy, you said that you kind of waxed poetically about that the other day. Ryan, I do want to kind of give you an opportunity just to kind of give your like 2 cents on really like the two offensive pass interferences that were called at the end of the game. I think are probably the main sticking point for a lot of fans.
Yeah. I also I don't know how much I want to be bummed out about those two calls at the end. Obviously, more and the more egregious one seems like the Tisslaw, where Amon-Ra catches the touchdown pass. But the Lions were also benefactors of that on the other side of the field when Darnell Washington ran into DJ Reed. So I don't know. I can't ask you to cry for me, Argentina, when it happened on the other side of the field. So did it seem like Darnell Washington's was a little more, hey, I'm purposefully trying to get in your way, whereas Tesla's looked like he was like just basically starting his route and not too far into that position to be considered OPI? I don't know. I think the things at the end of the game leave me less frustrated because, again, I don't think the Lions deserve to win that football game by any means. So it just seemed like craziness was happening. And it was like, if the Lions win this stupid, dumb game, I don't feel any better about this football team after this game. It was very reminiscent of like what the Giants game would have been
Yeah.
had they lost that game,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
If the Lions would have lost that game, would have been the same thing. It's just the Band-Aid would have got ripped off a month ago. So that the I, do you have any takes about either of those calls? Did you feel differently? Were you as just like mesmerized as I was seeing Jared Goff pull off the most athletic feat he's ever pulled off in his NFL career?
I think that was like I was disappointed. Like that was like the if there's
Oh
a
yeah.
thing that like I'm taking from that game that's probably the most disappointing is that doesn't become the new like Matthew Stafford throwing a touchdown with a dislocated shoulder or the Riley like that play would have like lived there
Yeah.
where it's Amon-Ra pitching it touchdown, but like yeah, like I wasn't terribly like just shocked or upset about the fact that Amon-Ra got called for offensive pass interference. I will say, and this is just pass interference in general, I do sometimes struggle with it because I think there are certain receivers and certain players in the league that get away with using more extension or using their
Yeah.
wingspan or using their body a little bit more. And it's not a great look. And it's not a great look for Lions fans when a team that doesn't get enough defensive pass interference calls, they did get one in this game that was huge,
Yep.
but it's like when a team that doesn't rarely get any, all of a sudden gets offensive pass interference called, like I understand the frustration. I understand why you want to immediately run to Twitter or whatever social media and type the same old message about how you feel like you're getting screwed over by the refs. The Tesla one though, it's similar in the sense of this. I am becoming more and more confused about what can be considered offensive pass interference on the goal line because I feel like I've seen more and more egregious things by other teams across the league where the excuse is always, well, it's within 1 yard line. It's within the 1 yard line. And I'm like, but that player clearly wasn't trying to run a route. Like they really were just taking advantage of the fact that, like, oh, I'm just going to stay within 1 yard and literally just set a screen. So that's my only thing with the Tesla one. I
Yep.
agree with you, Ryan. It wasn't nearly as egregious as the Darnell Washington one. But at the end of the day, yeah, this team didn't play well enough to win that game. We talked about what the third quarter we looked like, what the third quarter looked like. We talked about how the run game was non-existent. So it's really hard to say all of those things and then get to the end of the game and be like, well, they should have won because you guys didn't call because you guys called these two penalties.
It was the saddest drive though. Like just think about that drive as a whole. They had an opportunity because they did get the missed field goal. They had 5 seconds, right? What did they try to do? Which I called it. I was like, he's going to try to run the football because
you get the 2 minute warning. You got the 2 minute warning. You have 2 seconds before the 2 minute warning. Run play is like you can call that 99 out of 100 times. Like coaches love to do that.
Oh, and Dan Campbell would love it more than anybody on a night where the run is not working at all,
Right.
and you got a negative 3 yard run.
See, I didn't abandon the run. I ran on the last play of the game, the last drive of the game.
Yeah, see, I did it, and then it was incompletion, and then the call that gets upheld on the catch by Zylstra.
Yeah.
But Miko, you're also a benefactor of a 14-yard pass interference penalty on Kyle Duggar
On fourth down, correct?
on 4th and 2. Yep. Which it was such a bang bang play. Like it was pass interference. It was a great call. For sure.
I thought it was so egregious.
Yeah.
I thought it was a bang bang play. He got his hand on his hip and he impeded him from making the catch. But like in slow-mo, you could see that. Yeah. I thought in real time, it just looked super ugly because J-Mo was ass over tea kettle. And it was like, whoa, that has to be a penalty.
And also, like, I saw people online complaining about like how late those flags came in. I will tell you, as someone who was watching the officials right after the play, that dude was digging in his pocket for like 3 seconds. Like he just couldn't find the flag.
I will say on that play specifically, I gave JMO so much credit for the theatrics of it because I think that's again something we've talked about in the past of why the Lions probably don't get DPI calls. Bro, freak out. Throw a tantrum if you have to.
Scotty doesn't like that though. Scotty Montgomery, I asked him about it. He's like, nah, we're not in the business of drawing penalties. We're in the business of catching the football.
Well, hey,
maybe you'd have a few more wins.
the OPI on St. Brown, who was that against?
Jalen
Ramsey.
A guy who probably knew how to sell it, right? You know what I mean?
No doubt about it. Like I think it like there was a full extension of the arms. You're gonna get called all the time.
Yeah.
So
I guess I just want to point out, though, that like 29 yards of that drive was facilitated through pass interference and tripping. Alex Highsmith, who wanted to catch Jared Goff and keep him up and sack him the right way because he immediately like drew so much attention to himself on the trip where he was like, no, don't fall. I tripped you. But just what an ugly game. And that drive was just like this is...
I want to throw in two more things about the ending of the game. First is that I understand like the pick play is very, very commonplace on the goal line, 1st and goal. I get that that's a very common play, but I don't love the play call there because that is the risk of calling a pick play right there. OPI. And you open yourself up to that vulnerability because the worst thing you could do in that situation is go backwards. The worst thing you can do in that situation, like throw it in the end zone 4 times if you really, really have to, fine. I would maybe put David Montgomery in the football game and like give your big bruising goal line back an opportunity to put it away. And I understand there's a risk in that, right? Like you only have one timeout. You don't want a clock running too much and take away 4 shots. But I just don't like, it reminds me a little bit of the Dan Skipper play against Dallas where it's like, you got a little too cutesy. You allowed this game to be put in the officials' hands by doing too much.
That's a play or like that sequence of plays to your point, like about bringing David Montgomery into the game. That would have been the perfect time for like them to run the whole Wildcat where it's just a direct snap to David.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I don't know the numbers offhand, but I feel like that play's been successful. Like
last week,
like 100 out of 100 times.
Yeah, they ran against the Rams and it was fine. And like give him the freedom. Like if he sees a lane, run. If not, throw it out the back out of the end zone.
Exactly. You don't have to burn the timeout, right? Like the direction can be, hey, throw the football, but it's pass interference onto Slaw, a 5-yard false start penalty from Kingsley Watkins. So you went from being on the goal line to on the 16-yard line.
Yeah,
those are
disaster.
That's an entirely different part of your call sheet.
Yep. And then the last one on the, like, I still think the most controversial that game, the way that game could have been ended is if they picked up the offensive pass interference and called that a touchdown. Because I'm sorry, that was not a touchdown. His forward progress was stopped for 3 seconds. And if that had been ruled a touchdown and the Lions had scored, Pittsburgh would have every reason to be absolutely pissed off because that was like the fact that that was originally called short. They originally called it forward progress. They huddled together and decided it was a touchdown. Why they took 3 minutes to decide it was a touchdown that was never going to count anyways, I don't know. Why is that important?
Moral
Like,
victories.
it doesn't make like if you get into that huddle and you say we're calling OPI, why don't we just stop the game there and you end the theatrics and the pool report was really interesting because they went through all these things like you're not allowed to advance a fumble, so we had to decide whether that was a lateral or a fumble. We had to decide whether he was down or was not. My question is why? Why do you have to decide any of that? There's a penalty that negates the whole thing and ends the game. Why are you making sure the box score is pristine? Who cares? The play-by-play needs to be exactly of how it's happened. Shut up. Just end the game and stop dragging us for 2 minutes. And then you come out and say it's a touchdown, but it doesn't count. What? Why are you teasing us like this?
It causes us more pain, Brian. That's all it's about. It's about how much pain can we inflict on Lions fans a few days before Christmas.
Like that's why a witness's memory as testimony isn't the best, right? And all of those refs and officials just huddled together, to Jeremy's point. Did this happen? Did that happen? Did this happen? Did that? Do all of you have photographic memory? Like, why aren't you looking at a video review of this? Like, right. just go. Like, we're spending this much time to test your guys' memory skills rather than the reason why replay exists, to speed things up, to move things along, to get things right. Dumb.
Well, at the end of the day, that's why Righteous Felon exists as well, so that they can get things right for us when it comes down to being able to have a high quality protein snack that you can enjoy just about any time across the year. Again, the Pride of Detroit podcast is brought to you by Righteous Felon Craft Jerky. It's the jerky that fuels the Pride of Detroit POD cast. Each 2-ounce bag of jerky has 16 to 20 grams of protein, and each stick has 8 grams. Trust me, if it's good enough for the Lions, it's going to be good enough for you too. Righteous Felon is based in Westchester, Pennsylvania. They use locally sourced, all-natural Black Angus beef and prides itself on superior quality, revolutionary branding, and unique flavors that go beyond the stereotypical jerky offering. Guys, the other day I posted basically my order from Righteous Felon, and it was a little ridiculous. Like, I'm kind of having trouble figuring out where I'm going to put stuff in my cabinets because I have the kids' snacks, I have my snacks, the wife's snacks. But at this point in time, Righteous Felon is taking up an entire corner of our pantry between the different bags of jerky I got, between the meat sticks. It's a party. And so I can't recommend this company enough if you're looking for an amazing protein snack that has a bunch of just incredible flavors across the board. You definitely want to check them out. So if you go over to righteousfelon.com, use the promo code POD15 at checkout, you can get 15% off your order. Again, that's promo code POD15 at righteousfelon.com. With all that said, listen, normally we take a break here and we talk about what did the Lions have to do to kind of continue this playoff push. That dream seems like it's kind of died a little bit. So with that said, when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about what this team needs to do in general just to be able to reclaim the identity and what we think they should be going forward. So we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more right after this. And welcome back to the Pride of Detroit POD cast, segment 2 here, where we are going to be looking at, listen guys, the Lions have 2 more games left on the season. And we talked about it a little bit in the first segment where this team needs to find a way of recapturing their identity. They don't seem to be the Lions that we have come accustomed to under Dan Campbell the last few years. And I got to start with you, Jeremy. When you look at these next 2 games, I guess I'll just ask it like this: how important is it for this team to basically get back to some semblance of the team that we know, whether it leads to a playoff berth or not?
My honest answer is it probably doesn't matter. The way I see things, things are going to be very different next year. They've got 20 some free agents. I hope that they go find help on both of the lines. It'll be nice for my own mental health. It'll probably be nice for Dan Campbell's mental health, and some of these players are probably going to be auditioning a little bit too, right? For their own jobs, for their ability to stay around if they're on an expiring contract for wherever their next play is. I do think it's important. I would say the thing that's important more than anything else is to continue to see the fire in the team because that's the one thing like they haven't lost that, right? We had all pretty much given up on that game after like one of the 45-yard runs or maybe after the second one. The team didn't give up and they still have that fire, they still have that grit. I don't think that's going anywhere, but if that goes, then I don't know what we can hang our head on at all, right? Like if they're getting worse, if they're being sloppy, if they're schematically not where they are, those are fixable things. Those are, I mean, Dan Campbell's said it all year, like these are self-inflicted. We can fix them. We can fix them. They didn't, but if the effort drops, if you're like starting to lose the culture war, to be clear, I don't think that's going to happen. But like that is the one thing. If that happens, then we've got even bigger problems on our hands. So the if you're talking about things I'm looking for in the final two games of the season, it's that. Don't lose that. Don't give up on a game. And while last week, Sunday was kind of sliding into that territory with some of the way the second half was being played, I do give them at least a little bit of credit for really battling there at the end when I thought that game was absolutely over.
Yeah, Ryan. I think effort is definitely one thing that we can look forward to. I know for me personally, it is just like I want to see some semblance of this offense being able to find something in the run game. Like I get that the defense is probably going to look a lot different, but like this run game can't go out like this. Like the way that they've looked the last couple weeks with the Vikings team and a Bears team, that I still think like running the ball wise that you are better than, that needs to still shine. There still needs to be at least a ray of hope that like, hey, maybe it is just the fact that this offensive line is new. Over the next couple of weeks, prove that to me. Prove to me that it's just some like personnel issues, just that it's some like, hey, we need to probably get a different approach to the run game. But if it's not, like I'm going to have a lot of questions going into the offseason about what the hell this offense is going to be because to your point in the first segment, it can't be Jared Goff throwing the ball 50 times. Like that just can't be the future of this offense under Dan Campbell.
I think the in hindsight, the thing that bothers me the most about this season is the most optimistic I felt about this offensive line was when Frank Ragnow announced he was coming out of retirement. Like
What a
that
great
felt like
48 hours.
it felt like such a watershed moment for this Lions season when it came to their offensive line. But then as soon as it wasn't a thing, it was this harsh reminder of, yeah, like nobody's walking through that door. Nobody's walking through that door to save this offensive line. And it became a cliche to a point where over the course of 22, 23, 24, the offensive line was the engine that drove this offense and the offensive line this and the offensive line that to the point where I think to some people that felt to be a slight to Jared Goff or it felt to be a slight to maybe the running backs to an extent, right? Where it's like, well, I mean, their offense is just so good. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown is a good receiver, but he's not great. Like it's really the offensive line. The offensive line does this and that and the other thing. Yeah, the offensive line is pretty darn important. It matters a whole lot. And I think when you have a guy who, again, I think a lot of people, myself included at times this season, really piled on Graham Glasgow. And man, the difference between him and a guy who was making his first career start at center, pretty noticeable, right? When Michael Neese gets into the game, the Lions give up a safety. There was a lot. I mean, according to the broadcast, even Miles Frazier got some snaps at center. According to Jim Nance and Tony Romo. Oh, Jeremy, you missed out on an
It was some
absolute
good.
delight.
Hmm.
Tony
Right.
Romo called Christian Mahogany. Oh, that's like the Lions' seventh or eighth guard on their depth chart. It was,
Nailed it.
it was a banner year. But the offensive line is just you want to throw up your arms a little bit and say Frank Ragnow retired. Uh, you had an all pro, all generation Hall of Fame caliber football player who decided to hang it up when he was 29 years old. How do you pick up the pieces from that? You can't replace a guy like that. They tried.
But
They had
yeah.
plans, right? Like, well, maybe Tate Ratledge. Maybe Tate Ratledge is the answer moving into next year, where it's we're going to train him at center, and like this is our plan, and this is going to be our plan. We can get into the nitty gritty of like, oh, what the Lions need to do over the course of the next 4 months, right? Like, but I think at the end of the day, the Lions have the most work to do on offense along the offensive line. That's the most important thing that Brad Holmes has to address on the offensive side of the ball. Whether it's coaching, whether it's the players, I mean, it's all
Yeah.
the above, right? Like you can check all those boxes. All this stuff has to be under review.
And Jeremy, I would say like even the approach to how you fix those issues has to be under review because to Ryan's point, they went in with a plan, right? I put up finger quotes, but because the only reason I do that is because the plan does not seem to be working. But the plan was to have Tate Ratledge play at center, and then you find out pretty early in camp, yeah, Tate's not ready to play center, so we have to go to Graham. It it for a regime that I feel like previously always seemed to be a step ahead. And honestly, to to be very frank, would flaunt that like, oh no, we know more than the fans actually realize. I do think this is this offseason where like you need to revisit everything. Like not just the players you bring in, not just the players you decide to resign, but how you go about planning for the future of the season. Sure, the standard can still be the standard, but building a roster can't continue to look like this where it felt very, just being honest, half-assed to me. Like you simply had two different responses to Frank Ragnow retiring. Either Graham's gonna play center or we're gonna make Tate play center. There was like no concept of like maybe getting another more established veteran to be even behind Graham. Like there are a number of things that I think Brad Holmes and his staff as well are going to have to take a step back and look at like, okay, did we honestly come up with the best plan possible to set this team up in the event that X, Y, and Z transpired?
Yeah, the offensive line was, I mean, there are a lot of questions I think we have to ask Brad to figure out exactly why he did what he did. You know, obviously, at what point did he know Frank Ragnow was probably going to retire? Obviously, didn't come in. The announcement didn't come until after the draft. Would that have changed free agency? Would that have changed the draft? We still don't know. What I think we do know is that at some point the Band-Aid had to be ripped off, right? At some point there had to be a youth movement on that offensive line. Should they have done a better job making sure that there were like veterans in that room that they trust that they could step in and play and start if they need to? I mean, yeah, probably, right? You know, any of the backup guards that came into the game did not really do much, right? Like Coyote Awashika, a guy that I think a lot of us thought they trusted, was a healthy scratch this past game because he's been playing so bad. Cologne hasn't been good. Maybe they expected to have, um, um, some of these guys around here longer than they did. Um,
Moody.
Moody, yeah. Although he came back and then they cut him. I don't know. It it didn't work out, and when it doesn't work out, you're right, Miko. You have to not only say like, oh, well, it wasn't our fault. You have to say like, okay, what about our process was wrong? What about our process was hastily made, wrongly made? What assumptions did we make that we shouldn't have? All of that is 1,000% on her review. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to find out the answers to any of these questions in the next 2 weeks. I look at this week's game against the Vikings, and that's a team that they really struggled to run the ball against 2 months ago, and a team that is probably going to run the ball a heck of a lot against them, considering they're on QB3. That has been the book on how to beat the Detroit Lions this year at this point in the season. So, like, am I expecting the Lions to beat a Vikings team they're way better in and rebound and get the running game on track and get the run defense on track this week? Not really.
Hey, they're 6-point favorites on the road. I don't know.
I can think of another time they were about 6.5, 7 point favorites recently.
Easy, Jonathan Vilma.
I threw a 6.5 in there. It interrupted it.
Okay, that does count. That's fair. Miko, I think to Jeremy's point and what he just said, over the course of these next 2 weeks, you want to know if this is a gritty football team. You want to know if this is a football team that still gives a damn and is still behind Dan Campbell all the way to the bloody end, whether it results in a playoff berth or not. How does that run game look like? And then on the other side of the ball, how does that run game look like? I think those are the two things that you want to hone in on the most. Those are effort things, right? But I think that's why Dan Campbell ties his identity to those things, because I think that there is a mentality with it. He's talked about that, right? Like if you can foster that mentality, even when the chips are down, even when there
Hmm.
isn't, I mean, there's something to play for, right? But there's really not a lot to play for. Is this team going to respond to that? And if they do, then you're left encouraged. If they don't, oh boy, we have some things that we're going to be thinking about over the next 4 months, and there's going to be a lot of chatter on 97.1.
Well, to add to that extra chatter and those extra things that they're gonna have to think about, you have to probably lump in there both of your coordinators. I hesitate to say both, mainly because I think Kelvin Shepard has much more has earned himself a little bit more grace just in the simple fact of being a first time coordinator. And I think we saw enough good in the early parts of the season when he did have the best safety tandem out there, when he did have a few more weapons at his disposal. But even still, Shep has to go into this offseason and probably reevaluate a number of things of how he actually wants this defense to play, specifically his front seven, which I thought he would probably lean into a little bit more this season. But the Lions really do have to make a decision, and I know we've talked about in the past what they are going to do about play calling, because I feel like at one point in time I was kind of okay with Dan Campbell calling plays, and whether it's how he calls plays or just wanting something more diverse, more dynamic, more unpredictable, I have now opened that door, Jeremy, to like see if you can find someone that can partner up with him to help him think outside of the box that he already seems to think works very well for this team.
Yeah, I think everything should be on the table this offseason. Like everything. I'm not calling for anybody's job, but I don't think anyone's job should be safe, if I'm being completely honest. Um, I've had some issues with the scheme for a while on both sides of the ball. I've had some issues with the overall philosophy for a while of this like, hey, let's stop the run first and earn the right to pass rush on third down. I feel like that's a little bit too old school. Like I understand like the league moves in waves and suddenly teams are getting a little bit more bulkier and there's these 13 personnel looks that some teams are giving you. Like I understand all of that. But on the end, like you still have to get to the passer. You still have to be disruptive in the pass game. You still have to be able to, on offense, create explosive plays. And listen, the offense, I think, is way closer than the defense is right now. But it's hard for me not to look at the Eagles. 2022, you what you win, you lose in the Super Bowl, you lose your offensive coordinator, you lose your defensive coordinator to head coaching jobs, Shane Steichen, Jonathan Gannon. Next year, two new guys, doesn't work out. They go 11-6 with that huge collapse at the end of the season, get bounced in the wild card game. What do? They clean house. They get a new offensive coordinator, they get a new defensive coordinator, and they win the Super Bowl. Like, I think the Lions need to act with a little bit of urgency here. I don't want to get too deep into window talk because I don't think the Lions window is as closed as some make it out to be, but you do have a talented roster. You do have guys on both sides of the ball at all sides, at all levels. You have good offensive linemen. You have good defensive linemen. You got good linebackers, running backs, wide receivers, safeties, corners. You have enough talent to be a Super Bowl team, and you can't wait. You can't continue to like wait because every year there's going to be a lot of roster overturn, including this year. And so there needs to be a little bit more urgency, I think, on both sides of the ball. And yeah, like that's you're going to go through more, you know, learning lessons. You're going to go through more tough times with new coordinators and new schemes. And do I expect them to do any whole scale schematic changes on offense? No, I don't. I think they like what they're doing on that side of the ball, and it's hard to argue. They just got to clean up the sloppiness. Defensively, I think there needs to be someone in that room that offers a different point of view. And I'm not saying fire Calvin Shepard. Maybe it is get him a senior defensive assistant. Get him a Dom Capers that just provides a little bit of pushback, a little bit of an outside the box thinking, because I feel like the Lions have been living in this like man heavy scheme, stop the run, for like framing of how defense is supposed to be played. And I want someone in that room that's like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to sit on your hands on third down. You don't have to give up every third and 11 conversion every single time. There are ways to get Aiden Hutchinson free without dropping him into coverage or without, you know, having him curl around. Like you can play him more on the inside. Remember when you guys used to do that and it kind of worked? It just feels like there's no creativity on defense, even though I will admit, like Kelvin Shepard has been more fungible, right? Like we've seen him be a little like
Hmm.
not he's not as rigid as Aaron Glenn, but I would still probably call him rigid.
Yeah, I think to your point about them being more like the Eagles, I think that absolutely includes coaching and being willing to make those changes if you feel like, hey, this just isn't working out, kind of like they did in 2021 with Anthony Lynn. It was just like it's not working. And they didn't think it was going to work by just simply like, oh, this is what Dan wants now. But I also think that's also how you construct the roster. And it brings us back to Brad Holmes because the thing that the Eagles continue to do, whether they were getting to the Super Bowl or getting bounced in the wild card, was continuing to pick. To me, Ryan, it was obvious talent. Like guys that you sat there and you were like, damn, like the Eagles got him too. Like, how are they just continuing to reload and reload and reload at premium positions that specifically on the defensive side to make them one of the better defenses in the league? It hasn't looked that way this year, but in previous seasons, like it was kind of a marriage of the two. And I think that's where, for me, it does have to be a philosophy change in how you play defense in the same way that you're talking about, Jeremy, that it's not just like Superman heavy, but how do we become more aggressive with our defensive front? You have an Aiden Hutchinson, you have an Aleem McNeil, you invested in a Tyleek Williams because you think that he can develop into, I don't know, a premier pass rusher on the interior or Aleem McNeil 2.0, however you want to look at it. But that can't just continue to be, you can't continue to have those pieces and then use them the way that you are. And Jeremy, something that you said on PODD Direct, like, was about like they're great on first and second down, like in terms of being an effective defense. I just don't understand like what it's going to take for them to flip that switch on third down to go from like, hey, you're able to do this really well on first and second down, earn the right to brush the passer, and then yet you then decide to put on kitten gloves once you get to third and long. Why aren't the fangs coming out? Why isn't the aggressive nature coming out in those situations? And I think that's, Ryan, that's something that this coaching staff has to look at going not just these next couple of weeks, but going into the offseason as well.
Yeah, but there's just so much overturn to both points that you guys made, right? Where it's like a lot of the depth on this team is going to look different. Some of the starting spots are going to look different. Alex Anzalone, Amik Robertson, uh, a guy like Marcus Davenport, who's out snapping Al Qadim Muhammad at this point. I don't know why. I'm not too sure what you're getting at with that when, Muhammad had he had three pressures and Marcus Davenport had a big old fat zero according to PFF in less snaps. It's it's hard. I understand what you're saying, Miko. Like you don't want to put the cart before the horse when it comes to coaching because look at the past two draft classes and I just feel like the Lions are going into another offseason where they have huge questions in the secondary. The secondary has so many question marks. Brian Branch is going to be available maybe next season. With his Achilles exploding, like who knows when you're going to get that guy back, and who knows in what condition you're going to get him back. If it's anything like you got in Aleem McNeil, where it's just been like a roller coaster season while that guy is trying to get his sea legs, that could be tough. Where's Kirby at with his knee, right? There's all those questions. There's a Meek. There's Terry and Arnold. Are you going to get anything out of Ennis Rakestraw? There's so many questions in the secondary that the point that you made earlier, Miko, is you have to think about your process. What has been your process and strategy for putting together a secondary? Because it doesn't seem like it's really worked as far as like a long term strategy. And that comes back to Jeremy's point about coaching. So there's just so many like tough conversations to have about this football team over the next few weeks. And especially once the season is over, as they take stock of what they have and what they're choosing to move forward with, it's it's uncharted territory, and it's pretty scary. If I'm being honest, like I think the bigger bummer about this season coming to the end this way is that there's a lot at the feet of Brad Holmes and
Yeah.
Dan Campbell in a way that Jeremy, have they really had to do have they had to do this before? Like not to like this level, right?
Well, they got to early on, right? Like they needed whole scale overturns early in their roster, or early in
Right.
their run, and they had a ton of resources to do so. Now you kind of have to, but you don't have the resources. I mean,
Your
your draft picks are going to be better than expected, but
your bank
that
account is smaller.
right, and that's a really challenging part, and I think that's why some people are starting to get into the window talk because now your margin for error is much smaller when it comes to your offseason moves. You kind of have to hit on everything. You don't have a ton of cap space to maneuver around. I mean, listen, they're going to restructure a ton of contracts and they'll have some spending money. It's not like they're literally just going to like, well, we have to re-sign the guys that we want and that's it. No moves. No, they'll bring in guys for sure. But they're gonna have to bargain bin shop a little bit. They're gonna have to find like a Meek Robertson type deals where, that was a good contract, right? It
Yeah.
wasn't, a home run necessarily, but it was a nice little double. We know Brad Holmes loves the baseball analogies. Um, I do think again, like offensively speaking, I think they're close, but they need those offensive line reinforcements that we were talking about. There needs to be significant investment there, whether it's draft picks or free agency. And what little left you have after that, I mean, you have all these questions on the defensive line because Josh Pascal, Levi Onwuzurike, Marcus Davenport, Al Qadim Muhammad, these are all guys that are free agents. Some probably don't deserve another contract here. Some might have priced their way out. Al Qadim Muhammad, Alex Anzalone, like you said, there are significant positions there. The good news is like I don't feel it can get like a ton worse than it is right now. I know that's a famous last words type of thing to say, but the offense can still carry this team in 2026, and hopefully by then you've figured out something defensively. Um, I know that is not a very like optimistic way to kind of leave that conversation, but that's kind of where I'm at. I think the offense is still going to be relatively fine. You have enough playmakers on that side of the ball. You should be better as an offensive line this upcoming year because some of your young players are going to be better. Because I do anticipate Brad Holmes not sitting on his hands when it comes to the offensive line. I think that's the one place where I don't think they cut corners. I think this year turned out the way it did for a multitude of reasons. Maybe some things that weren't in their control, some things that probably were. But I don't think he's going to go out there and say we're good when it comes to their offensive line. I really don't. One, because he never
I,
said that. Two, because I don't think it's true.
I was gonna say, I think last week we were all like, we were kind of joking about the fact like, no, Brad's gonna look at certain stats and be like, no, like, see, we were successful in these areas, and that's gonna be like his way of
Yeah,
calming the masses. I don't, to your point, Jeremy, I don't think he'll be able to do that this year. Like these last few weeks of the run defense and the run game on the offensive side have been so bad that like you can't just throw out a total. You can't just tout the fact that like, hey, Jameer was an offensive player of the year candidate. Yeah, that's mostly Jameer. Like, if
right.
we're being completely honest,
That
like
was like a
Jameer
month
and
ago.
a right. Like there's so many things. So like that's why I do kind of cringe a little bit when you're like, hey, it can't get much worse. I think it can because I think the worst thing that could possibly happen these next 2 weeks, or honestly after these next 2 weeks, is for Brad Holmes to get in front of a mic and dig his heels in, and to make a stance that like it wasn't as bad as we all clearly witnessed it to be, whether they make the playoffs or not. Like again, holding him true to the words that came out of his own mouth, Ryan. The standard is the standard, and right now you are playing below the standard. I don't care if you do back into the playoffs. I don't care if the Packers do collapse and you find a way in to play, get a rematch against the Rams or play Seattle or whatever the case may be. This is not the standard. This is not how Lions play football. At least that's not what we've grown accustomed to. And I think to Jeremy's point and something that we've all agreed on, it really stems from the top down, from how this team was constructed to how they've been coached to how the players have executed on the field on certain weeks.
Yeah, but now it's a matter of looking at certain positions and saying, well, if the standard is the standard, is Christian Mahogany your guy moving forward at left guard? Like, good, maybe not great this year. You had 2 games of film tape to go off from his rookie season. Like, is that enough? I don't know. Is it enough? Is obviously Marcus Davenport isn't enough, but how much more can you invest in terms of resources to beef up the other, you know, edge rusher opposite of Aiden Hutchinson? It's just I think that's going to be the most interesting tell of their offseason is what are the areas that they decide are absolutely not good enough and where do they decide to pour their resources into? Because I think I'm with Jeremy at the end of the day. You just have to do everything to make this offensive line good enough
Sure.
that your offense can carry you. You know, and and
I
and, and you want to be
yeah,
optimistic about the defense. You want to hope that maybe a philosophy change, a scheme change, a player here or there helps get them by and be good enough that it's not as bad as it was in 2024 with all the injuries and certainly not as bad as it's been here to end the season. But I think Jeremy, I don't know if you saw, but Aaron Schatz, he pointed out that the Lions would be, I think, like the third best team by DVOA standard to not make the playoffs. DVOA is a broken statistic.
Right.
it
That
definitely
was
is this
that
year.
was my takeaway. Like I wanted to reply to Aaron and be like, "Well, your metrics broken, so
I
like you need to go do
yeah.
some tinkering."
I would also probably respond like, wait, just wait. Let's see what it looks like after 2 games, right? Because
Sure.
one thing about DVOA is like the one thing that I do like, not one thing, but one of many things that I like about it is that they continually start to weigh more recent games and kind of fade away from the early games. And so I think like as it continues to weigh the past month of the season a little bit heavier, I think you're going to see that DVOA drop pretty significantly.
Yeah. Ryan, one thing I did want to just circle back to really quick. You brought up the question about whether or not Christian Mahogany is your left guard of the future. I know that was just like one of the many things that you're talking about that they need to reevaluate. That that is a good example though of like an area where I think the Lions made an assumption. I truly do think that they went into the offseason like, no, this is like Christian's going to be our guy. And then you got into the offseason and realized that you weren't going to be able to have the competition that you wanted to because I think they made assumptions across that offensive line. I think they assumed that Tate would be able to take on center a little bit more, which was going to free up Graham to potentially compete for either left or right guard. I don't think they expected Miles Frazier to probably be hurt as long as he was hurt, which was going
Right.
to allow for even more competition. Like, I don't think they got the opportunity to have like a true competition for their offensive line. I think they got to a point where they were like, these guys are out. This person isn't really, coming on as quickly as we thought we would. We literally just have to find the 5 best guys. And I'm
Hmm.
not saying that Christian Mahogany isn't one of those guys, but I think to your point, it wasn't something that they got to really battle test in camp to see like, is Christian Mahogany that much better than Graham at left guard? Or is
Hmm.
he that much better than Miles Frazier? Like, we're sitting here near the end of the season, and some people are still like, hey, I would still like to see more of Miles Frazier at this point.
I think everybody wants to see a little more of something that just isn't going to happen. Like I saw people being like, "You might as well throw Tate Ratledge at center, see what happens." And it's like, well, I don't know. Like I want to see Jared Goff's ACL intact. I don't
Right.
want,
Don't
I
you know,
throw
was gonna
Giovanni
say,
Manu out
but
there. Like, let's not be crazy here.
yeah, maybe as a 6 offensive lineman, but I mean, goodness gracious, I, I, I think the mahogany thing is an interesting microcosm of what's going to happen moving forward over the course of the offseason. And the big question is at what positions will they go Emmanuel Mosley, Marcus Davenport? Which positions are they going to Kevin Zeitler? You know what I mean? Which positions are they going to DJ Reed?
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
and and
yeah,
taking a look at that where it's
that's a
like,
good point.
where do you spend big? Where do you bargain bin shot? I don't
Please
know.
spend
It's a
big on
big
the O
question.
line. Please spend big on the O line. If
I
I could
agree.
just
Right.
ask ask Brad for anything, I may even overlook you not drafting a defensive player in the first round if you just invest heavily in the free agency at,
The
at the
the
Right.
offensive
the
line.
the 2026 NFL draft for the Lions. OL 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 OL.
But listen, to make it festive, it's like your kid approaching you and going, "Just get me one big gift." I don't like. I just want like give me the RC car. I don't need anything in my stockings. I don't need a bunch of the little bells and whistles. Just give me the RC car. That's all I want.
I'll add something onto that because I'll say something that my daughter once said. She got to the point where we had bought her so many art supplies that she was like, "Hey, I don't need another drawing pad. Like I'm good." That's how I feel about like another pass rusher that's in the Marcus Davenport category. We've done this enough. I'm good.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes though, you get that RC car and you traded a couple of first round draft picks and a run stuffing defensive tackle, and sometimes that RC car breaks. So just be careful if you're going to go shopping for one big ticket item.
I feel like even talking about RC cars makes us sound extremely old. Do people still enjoy those?
I
I
just bought my
wanted,
nephew one for his birthday.
Oh, okay, great. Never mind.
yeah, and like my aunt sent me one where she's like, "Do you think Teddy would like this?" I'm like, "He's probably like 6 months away from like having the dexterity to run one of those things." But I do want to say that when you said RC car as your example for one big ticket item, I was gonna say, okay, like Jeremy just watched A Christmas Story.
I was gonna say like I don't even know what
Should
the
I set a
equivalent would
BB
be now.
gun?
In this climate, no.
Action figure. Think of an action figure that
Turbo
you would have
Man.
to fight. Yeah, there you go. That you have to fight an actual person in a parade for to get the last one.
Would you fight DK Metcalf for the last Turbo Man? That would be the first question I'd ask to that fan.
I think he would say he was game.
You know what? I think that's what he actually said. He said he's just like DK. I got the last one.
And
Bam!
you found yeah.
DK, I got the last Turbo Man.
All right, guys. Well, that's pretty much going to do it for this week's episode of the Pride of Detroit POD. Like we said, this is a shortened week because the Lions play on Thursday because the holiday. So things are a little chaotic around here. But with that said, want to wish you all a happy holidays, a Merry Christmas. Celebrate however you do, and hopefully that you are enjoying your time with your families. If you are looking for any more additional Lions news, just because it's the holidays doesn't mean that you won't see in the occasional new article. You just probably won't see as many as you normally do. So definitely check out pridedetroit.com whenever you get a chance to check out all the latest articles that are being posted over there. And if you're watching this video over on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Both of those things help out the channel immensely. And yeah, makes it that much easier for you to find our videos in the future. So with all of that said, I'm Miko. He's Jeremy. He's Ryan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch and listen. And we'll see you guys in the next one.